Well, the signs are all around us, and health experts agree the nation is now in the grips of a fourth wave, just as a federal election gets underway. And even in the face of widespread vaccinations, case numbers continue to spike. So what does this mean for the coming weeks? Well, joining us now with more insight is epidemiologist Raywat Deonandan. Thanks so much for joining us early in the morning, Ray.
My pleasure to be here.
So let's start with the elections. What's your reaction to the timing, especially given the fact that, we're 6 days into a 500 plus case count here in Ontario? And if you have any advice for how Canadians can safely participate in the voting process?
Right. The institutions of democracy must continue regardless of whatever public health challenge faces us. So we know what to do here. One, of course, is get vaccinated if you can, if you haven't already. Two is wear a high quality mask when you go to the polling station. Three is if you can avoid going to the polling station, then vote by mail instead. So the registration process has begun for mail voting, and I've done mine already. Other things to do is just keep your distance if you go to the polling station. If you're talking to canvassers, again, keep your distance, make sure everybody's masks, and do everything outdoors.
Of course, and those are all, I guess, the obvious solutions, but I can also understand why voters would be understandably anxious when they look ahead to the election, because case counts are on the rise, and it's not just among the unvaccinated. We're seeing that here in Ontario, now that the province is revealing that type of information, especially among hospitalizations. But also, if we go to Israel, data also shows vaccinated people are still being hospitalized, despite that nation having an 80% vaccination rate. So if you could offer anything as to why we're seeing this when we've been told the vaccine is supposed to protect you at least against that, against hospitalization.
First of all, vaccines aren't 100% perfect. You're going to get some breakthrough infections and probably a handful of hospitalizations. And the more infections you get, the more hospitalizations you're going to get. The other thing to consider is something we call the base rate fallacy. This is what happens when an overwhelming majority of people become vaccinated. Then those infections that do occur are going to be increasingly among the vaccinated because of the sheer raw numbers. The example I give is if we have 100% of people wearing seatbelts, the car crash fatalities will come down, but among those that happen, 100% will be among people who wear seatbelts. Doesn't mean seatbelts don't work. It just means so many people are using them that they're the ones who are now going to die. Same with vaccination. So many people are getting vaccinated that the number of infections and hospitalizations has come down in that group, but they're still happening and they're overrepresented depending on how you look at the numbers. Now, vaccines are not bulletproof. Right? And we're going to get breakthrough infections all the time and waning immunity possibly. That's what we're seeing a little bit in Israel. So they were the first to get vaccinated, and so much time has passed that there may be some cases of people with lesser immunity now, which is a bit of a warning sign for us. We have to watch that scenario carefully to see when we have to deploy our own booster shots.
Okay, yeah, that takes me perfectly into my next question. Pfizer recommending booster shots to better protect people against the Delta variant. Last week, the U.S. FDA authorized third doses of either Pfizer or Moderna for the immunocompromised, and now we're hearing most Americans would be able to get a third shot, that announcement coming this week. So why haven't we heard any additional guidance from our Canadian government on potential boosters?
A few reasons. Number one is that we started vaccinating later, so we don't have the same problem with waning immunity. Number two, there's an issue with the interdose interval. So it turns out that the shorter the period between the first and the second dose, the more likely your immunity is going to wane. And Canada has a longer period between the first and second dose, which was very controversial when we did it, but now it's looking pretty smart. So we won't need a booster shot until later. Then there's people who claim that maybe you won't need it at all. Maybe our T cell and B cell immunity will carry us through this issue. I'm not sure. And the final thing to consider is it may be unethical to be rolling out third boosters for us when the rest of the world hasn't had first shots yet. This is a global pandemic. We have to take care of the entire species, not just our own country.
Okay, Ray, so Paw Patrol is coming out this week, and, it goes without saying how popular that is. How do parents take their kids to the movies safely?
COVID is airborne, which means we have to be on the lookout for airborne transmission. Hopefully the theater has good ventilation in place. If it doesn't, then you should investigate other options. Wear a high-quality mask indoors, an N95 mask if you can. And if you cannot guarantee that is the case, I personally would not take my child to a theater if I cannot guarantee that scenario.
Okay, thanks as always for your time and insight. That's epidemiologist Raywat Deonandan. Talk soon.